Relationships aren't always sunshine and rainbows. Just like in nature, you can't have rainbows without a little rain.
Journey with us
Shani Goodson
and Dr. Sundiata Soon-Jahta as we share stories and insights about our thriving, unconventional love life and our unique take on relationships and consensual non-monogamy.
Hey y'all, we're back. Sunshine and
Hello.
rainbows.
What's happening?
Thank you for coming back and joining us. And we're excited to talk today because we're going to start getting into telling you about how we got here, how we got to non-monogamy, how we went from living a life of basically compulsory monogamy to the non-conventional or unconventional non-monogamous lives we live now. And Sundiata is going to start us off. He's going to kick us off, and he's basically just going to tell us like the whole story. Tell us from the beginning, Sundiata. Like roll it back, rewind, however many years you need to go, and let us know how you first got here.
Yes. So yeah, let's get into it. This is a deeply personal story, but I'm gonna keep it real with y'all, and hopefully, some people can, get some more context and understanding for why people show up in the world like me. But I definitely want to go back to when I first started questioning, I guess, the norms of, we talked about the relationship escalator or the norms of monogamous marriages and lives in general. And I would say for me, it goes back to when I was a teenager. And I remember when I was a teenager, I would have thoughts. I would just be observing my environment and observing, the adults in my life. And I come from a pretty big family, and I also grew up in a neighborhood, inner city neighborhood, where we live close to each other, and my friends. I got insights into their family lives, etc. And one of the things that was a constant theme that I noticed was that there was a lot of turmoil in the lives of like adults, and in the form of seeing, I'll start with my family. My parents are separated. They were separated as a kid. I don't ever remember living with my dad. um, so him and my mother were separated and ultimately divorced, from my entire life, for the most part. And so we'll start there. And then when I looked around at a lot of my, let's say, aunts and uncles and their relationships, I saw divorce. I saw fighting, arguing. I saw infidelity or heard stories about infidelity. When I looked at, some of my peers and their parents, again, I saw divorce and stories about infidelity and fighting, arguing, etc. And so as a developing person in my mind, as a young person, it was like, whatever that is, it don't work. Like this marriage thing that I'm seeing out here, it don't work. Like what they have, I don't want. Um, I did have some positive examples, I would say, just based on, again, what I was able to see. My grandparents, you know, on one side of the family was pretty volatile, even though they were together their entire lives. I wouldn't say it was a picture perfect marriage or anything I would want to emulate, just based on the ways that my grandfather treated my grandmother. But then on the flip side, on another side of the family, I did see more of a healthy representation from my grandparents, and in terms of how they moved through the world, and their marriage lasted their entire lives. Um, However, the majority of the examples I saw were examples that I just didn't want to emulate, and it made me feel like I don't want it. And I took, and I'll say this: another thing that stood out to me, as I was growing up and going through like my teen years, I really loved and respected my mother. I really loved and respected my aunts and my grandmothers, and in like the pop world, pop culture, as well as, just growing up and being around guys. It was a lot of disrespect to women. The way that men generally held and treated women. This may sound foolish, but I was like, I don't want to be one of those dudes. I don't want to hurt. I don't want to be out here hurting a woman. So I'm not getting married for that reason as well. So not only did I not see like positive examples, I was like, you know what? For whatever reason is whatever the reasons are, it's something about being a man that seems like it's harmful to women. And I'm like, I don't want to be in a position where I'm out here harming women. I don't want to grow up to be a man and all of a sudden the way I show up is causing so much harm to women. So maybe I should stay away. That's how my teenage mind thought. I should stay away from that type of dynamic. And that carried over into my actually meeting who would eventually become my wife. I got married at the age of 26, but what I could tell you is when she and I started dating, um, I told her I'm never getting married. And I used to make jokes like, maybe we really got along from the outset of us dating. And I would make jokes, but I was like partly serious and like, we get along really well. How about we just live next to each other and raise children? Because I'm never getting married. And I told her all of my rationale back then. And, she also came from an upbringing of seeing infidelity and close to her life in the relationships, the adult relationships close to her life. She had a lot of trauma around seeing, infidelity. And I was like, let's not duplicate that. Whatever that is, let's not duplicate it. But we get along really well. So let's have children, live near each other and raise them together and just be cool. And, that type of energy lasted for like 3 years, where she was okay dating me and just us having a dope relationship, for 3 years, getting along really well. And then one day, she came to me and was just like, I want to be married. And either it's going to be you or it's going to be someone else. And I remember feeling like I don't want to lose her. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to lose this connection. And so I said, you know what? I've had a lot of fun. I've been free for some years in terms of being a young adult and being able to explore and experience, connecting with different people in different ways. And I'm like, maybe I am ready. Maybe I can do this. And at the forefront of it all, though, was I don't want to lose this amazing relationship with this person.
If you reflect on that now, does that feel like codependence in any way to you? Because in my head, codependence is when you hold on to a relationship, not because of the relationship, but because you're worried about losing it. So what do you think? I mean, yeah, I'm just curious.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I wouldn't, based on my understanding of codependence, where it's like this person is like enabling me or I can't function in some ways, without this person. Um,
And maybe to like a lesser degree, maybe not like extreme codependence. I'm just thinking like it's an interesting knowing what I know about you now. That's like such a is so against why you would ever be in a relationship now. Obviously, you've changed, right? This
yeah,
is 20 something years ago. So
yeah,
clearly things are different. But yeah, I knowing what I know about you now, it's just so far off from
yeah,
the reasons that you start and maintain relationships now. It's just really it's an interesting
yeah,
progression.
yeah,
So you go ahead. So you did it. You were like, I don't want to lose you, boo. Like I'm gonna do this faithful, monogamous.
yeah,
Let's do this.
yeah. That was it. And mind you, at this point, I had no concept of like non-monogamy, polyamory, or anything like that. We're doing the marriage thing and doing it well.
And
We're
the parenting thing. Not yet.
eventually,
Not yet. Okay.
eventually, we're everyone's favorite couple. Of course, I'm overly generalizing and saying everyone. Um, a lot of people, I don't like to do that anymore. So let me say a lot of people's favorite couple, you know, because we got along so well. We never argued, had a
Goals.
lot of fun. Our parents got along with us, our families got along. It was really like a model type, relationship. And I remember just always telling myself things like, you could do this, like you got this. At the time, we were going to church, we got counseling, marriage counseling, and all those things. And I was constantly telling myself, like, I'm ready, I could do this, you know. And I would say for the first 5 years of the marriage, I could. And it wasn't until I would say right around year five, um, where I started to notice that I was developing feelings for other people. I guess that's the best way to put it. But I was working at the time as a teacher, and hanging out with some of my peers, and I was elementary school teacher, so I'm around a lot of women, and we were young. We were all young. I mean, I don't know if any of that matters, but this is my story. So at that time, we were all young in our 20s, and it was a school full of like a bunch of young teachers in our 20s, and we would hang out and go to like, happy
Mhm.
hours and
Yeah, I know how it
go to
goes.
clubs and things like that on Fridays, and just had a really dope, social vibe with my coworkers, a group of coworkers, and ultimately, like one of those people, I started like catching feelings for, and it was so shocking for me in the moment because I remember thinking to myself like, if everything is solid in your
You have your nuclear
yeah, in
family.
my nuclear family and in my home relationship, which it was, then I literally thought that all that would cut off. I didn't think it was possible for anyone to cheat or be attracted to other people if they were happy. I had always bought into this narrative that that happens when you're unhappy.
Yeah.
So the fact that I was happy in my marriage and started having those feelings, it was jarring.
Yeah.
It was rattling. And, it was something that it was fun to feel. Me and this person had this real flirtatious, playful, connection.
It's fun.
The whole people here, the whole work wife, work husband thing. Kind of
You're
had
scaring all the monogamous people now. They're like, ooh, work wife, work husband.
I
You
was,
bet you love him. I bet you love her.
you know what? Man, it was interesting. It was tough.
And the feelings you felt like you were developing were romantic feelings, right? These were
Absolutely.
not just your regular run of the mill platonic or like even deeply platonic feelings. You felt like these were romantic and sexual feelings you were feeling.
Absolutely. They were romantic, they were sexual feelings. Um, and the grappling that I had to do in my head to figure that out, like to process that, and I had never been someone who was like a cheater, who was like used to running
Yeah,
game.
you said you don't want to hurt women.
I
You
don't want
never,
to hurt women. Like,
never been like a
yeah,
player out here trying to
never
talk
been.
to women. He's still not like this. Like to this day. So,
Yeah,
right.
I've never been that dude who was like comfortable with that type of dynamic.
So what'd you do?
I told her, I told my ex-wife, my now ex-wife at that time, as like a form of accountability, because I told her when we got married I would never cheat on her.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, if I ever got the urge, I would tell you.
Yeah.
And after some time of like grappling with what I was experiencing, I decided to go to her and tell her.
And you said,
I literally told her that I sat her down, and because I knew it was going to be tough. But I was like, look, I'm starting to develop feelings for other people and feeling like I want to have sex with other people, like
mm-hmm,
sexual attraction and feelings towards other people.
mm-hmm.
And
She said,
she started crying.
"Mm,
Yeah, she started crying, and that broke my heart. And of course, before all that, I'm grappling with all the feelings like, I knew I should have never got married. I knew I was
oh
I
no.
I knew I was one of those
Right, right.
because the story was what all men cheat. You know, um, that for me that was normalized growing up. Like this idea that all men cheat.
Yeah.
The quote unquote old heads, like when I was 11, 12, 13, all the guys in high school would brag about having girlfriends, but also cheating with this, that, and the other
Yeah.
girl.
And you didn't want that. So you told her the truth and it didn't go so well. Like well, she had a reaction, which, she
Yeah,
was entitled to, but you have a reaction to her reaction, which you're also entitled to.
yeah,
So how'd y'all move on? Because you stayed married
yeah,
after that for many years, right? So how'd
yeah.
you move on? Did you just kind of suppress? Did you, what did you do?
I went to counseling. I told her, I said, I'm gonna go to counseling because I don't want to have these feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to have these feelings. So maybe I should go to counseling. And that's what I did. Um, I think we went together once and then I started going on my own. And whew, that was an experience. Um, and this was 5 years into the marriage. Um, the counseling thing, it took a while to find a counselor that I felt like was understood me. Early on, the first counselor I went to thought like start based on her evaluation of the questions evaluation of me based on the questions she asked, she was like, maybe you're a sex addict.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that because I'm like, well, first of all, I'm like, hold on, am I? And then I went home and looked that up and I'm like, nah, that's not me. That's definitely not me.
Yeah.
Like when I looked up what a sex addict is and what that means
You
and
like,
how that
that doesn't
impacts people's
apply.
lives, I'm like, no, that does not apply to who I am and what I'm experiencing.
Right. And you weren't just wanting sex.
It so exactly. I remember what I would run simulations in my mind and I would think to myself, well, maybe it would be easier if I did just cheat and like protect my family by not like keep my family intact
Yeah.
and just cheat and not get caught. You could pay for sex if that's what it is. I would run these simulations in my mind. Like, is that what it is? Is that what I'm yearning? Is that what I need? Because ultimately what ended up happening is after that initial conversation, I left teaching like within a year or so. So, and I started doing real estate full time and I was no longer around a group of people doing the whole happy hour social thing,
Mhm.
but these feelings still existed.
Mhm. For other people or
Just
for the
in general.
right.
In general, I started to feel like this void and feeling like an incompleteness with being in a monogamous relationship. I started feeling like I had
Oppressed.
more love to give and I wanted to receive more love. I started feeling oppressed. I felt caged in.
Yes.
That's how it felt then. That's the only way I could articulate it back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
But I started feeling caged in. And so what happened is after the initial run of counseling, again, definitely wasn't a sex addict. I ended up moving on and finding a different counselor. Um, but after that initial, um, I'll say this, after the initial sessions, I would stop because I felt like I had a grasp on things. Just talking about it helped. And then like a year would pass and I would find myself going back to counseling because it would like flare up. I would have flare ups. Like that's the best way to explain it. Like I literally would have like these feelings of like feeling trapped and caged in and feeling like a need to like frustrated because I have this dope relationship with someone who I really love. At this point we had one child, about to have our second, and it's like why am I not fulfilled, why am I not happy? And it was
What's
bugging
wrong with
me.
me?
Yeah, what's wrong with me? It
Mhm.
was all about what was wrong with me. And so whenever I would have these flare-ups, I would go back into counseling for a few sessions, maybe a month or so, and then I would feel calm again and feel more balanced, and I would stop. That back and forth went on for 6 years. 6 years of me suppressing what was emerging inside of me after initially getting it sparked. Um, then leaving that environment, not being around any other woman on a regular basis except for my now ex-wife, and still having these feelings and these desires to want to experience someone else. But also, like I said, with running those simulations in my mind, I realized I wanted connection. I wanted relationship. I didn't just want sex. Just to kind of tie it back into the whole idea that I was thinking, the ways I was thinking about that earlier and how I would run simulations in my mind. I realized I wanted relationship. So somewhere along this journey in those 6 years, I went to Google and I asked, can you be in love with two people at the same time? Because I was experiencing feelings of love for this ex coworker. And that was like boggling my mind. Like, how am I experiencing this? Now, I mean, this is again years ago before I came to understand myself better and my capacity for love. But at that time, I had no idea, like, the difference between different types of love, et cetera. It was just like, can you love two people at the same time? And I stumbled across a term called polyamory, and it was the first time I had ever seen it.
Mhm.
And again, this is probably 2012, 2013. And when I found it,
You were like, "Oh, this is not like the sex addict stuff." You were like, "No."
nah, mm-mm.
But the polyamory stuff, you were like, "Okay, wait a
I
minute.
was like, that's me.
Wait a minute.
That's what I'm
Hold
experiencing.
on. Why do you know me?"
Yeah. It was like, that's me. That's what I'm experiencing. And I felt seen.
Yeah.
I felt like I
It's like
wasn't
a relief.
crazy. It was a relief because I literally felt like I was losing my mind, like something was wrong with me. I was abnormal in some strange ways
Mhm.
because I wasn't going out here wanting to cheat, but also I wasn't fulfilled and sustained at home. I was in like this middle ground that was a weird place and space. And it was like, yeah, like what's wrong with me? Something's wrong with me. I'm broken. So when I found the term of polyamory, it all made sense. And I remember eventually finding a polyamorous counselor. and that helped my therapy journey. And she asked me at the time, like, how did I want her to coach me or counsel me and to step into my full expression of who I am
Right.
or to stay in my marriage. And I said to stay in my marriage.
Right.
But it was important because other therapists didn't get it and they didn't get me, and they would say silly things like, again, you're a sex addict, or
Yeah.
if you really love your wife, you just gotta
Power through it.
power
Deal with
through it. Like
it. You'll
they
be fine. I
yeah, it was
understand.
a lot of weird stuff, and that just it wasn't
Dismissive.
dismissive and like treating me like something's wrong with me, like I'm, etc. So it was just a relief to find a therapist who was um empathetic to who I was and
Okay.
normalized who I was and understood it.
So you did the therapy
hmm
for on and off
On
for
and off the
6
6
years,
years. And
and it was
then
somewhat helpful,
it was somewhat
but
helpful, but ultimately it got to the point where I would lay my head down on my pillow at night and I would have some really troubling thoughts about everything, life, existence, um, this cage I felt like I was in. And I would have to tell myself stories to go against myself, if that makes sense, in order to stay in that marriage. I would have to downplay myself. I would have to like negatively talk about myself. I would say stuff like, you're selfish, you're greedy, etc. Just things to like suppress me. And that began to take a toll on me psychologically, mentally, emotionally. And I was literally having negative self-talk on a regular. Um, and I remember in order to feel good and feel human, I would read more and more. After I discovered polyamory, I started to read more and more about it. And that was the only way I could, again, kind of subdue some of the chaos that was going on inside of me during this stretch of time. And the more I read about polyamory, the more I understood it. Again, it made sense. It was like, these are my people. I felt like I had community and I would do it. I would hide. She didn't know I was doing this. Um, for the most part, she didn't know, but she knew I transitioned to a polyamorous therapist, et cetera. Because I would give her little insights here and there. She knew every time I went back to counseling, I would have to tell her I'm going back. She knew I was still grappling and dealing with these things. And then ultimately, again, 6 years in, I eventually got to the point where I decided I couldn't do it anymore.
how'd you have that conversation?
Man, that was tough. It was literally just like that. I forget like why I kind of got to this like point line in the sand moment. I forget what the circumstances was in the moment, but I remember I did. And I went to her and we had a joint counseling session. And, I remember talking about it with her and the counselor. Um, it just reminded me of another thing. Like, sh I don't remember why, but her and the counselor were like, maybe you're bipolar or it was some type of like mental condition and I should get tested for that. And maybe that's the issue. Or it was just so many things. I went through so many things just like getting to this place. But it was like, yeah, I'm not doing that and I just can't do this anymore. I gotta be me. I gotta like love myself. I gotta love myself because I was starting to not like myself and to hate myself. Um, and it was like, yeah, once I knew that there was a world out there that existed where people were able to step into their true nature and live this way, it was like almost just a matter of time. And for me, that was at the 6 year point. And she took it very hard, and it just everything.
That was 6 years of counseling, but how many years of marriage?
Oh, that was like 11 years of marriage at that
Right.
point. 11 years of marriage at that point, and yeah, ultimately that led to our separation. Very shortly after that, and then very shortly after that, divorce. And that's how I got here. That's how I got to living my truth of being naturally non-monogamous and polyamorous.
Very I think it's relatable for a lot of people. I think a lot of people have stories that are similar to yours, and, we see it in our community sometimes. It's a common thing where you start a marriage monogamous, right? And then you evolve, you change, you come into your own truth more, you kind of already knew that wasn't your truth. But compulsory monogamy is so ubiquitous, it looks like there's no other option, right? What other options are there? So as soon as you found another option, I think, I hate to say it like this, but it feels like as soon as you found that other option, your marriage was doomed unless your ex-wife was willing to evolve with you, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's part of what we talk about as far as relationships, that monogamous relationships aren't necessarily as resilient in these
Yeah.
ways. Like, what kind of reflections when you first when y'all first ended, like what kind of reflections you were, out the house now. You had two children who were pretty young. So like consequences, like did you feel regret? Did you have moments where you were like, man, I should have just stuck out this, or were you just like freedom and I gotta adjust?
No, I always knew it was a double-edged sword, a catch-22 and per se, and it was.
Hmm.
It was like I would always weigh the options. It's either
Hmm.
like stick with this for the rest of your life and deal with the pain of that, or deal with the pain of what's going to happen of losing your
There's
marriage,
pain
losing.
over here and there's pain over there. You got to decide what kind
Yeah,
of pain, right? You got to choose your poison, kind
yeah,
of.
yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Losing your marriage, losing, being with your children every day, losing the camaraderie and faith and
Security.
security of that relationship, as well as the extended family relationship, and having people upset with me, etc.
Hmm.
And I ultimately decided that, we all know I'm here. So what decision I made, and I went through it. It was hard. I lost my best friend. I lost being able to see my children every day.
Hmm.
I cried the day that I had to leave, or the day I had a conversation with my children. I cried. The day I had to leave, I cried. Um, I got a lot of backlash from family members. Like I said, we were a lot of people's favorite couple. A lot of people were crushed, and they couldn't believe that I would betray them.
Hmm.
Betray this path that we were all supposed to be on. um, you know, Friends looked at me sideways, family members looked at me sideways. I had family members try to intervene. My dad like flew to Atlanta where I was currently living at the time, and because I'm from Philadelphia, for those who don't know, and my ex-wife and I actually moved here together. That's how I got to the Atlanta area. Um, and I remember at the time my dad flew down to try to like intervene and talk some sense into me.
Hmm.
Her parents just couldn't believe it, and they were so upset with me.
Hmm. I'm
Um,
sure lots of people were just like, "Why don't you just cheat? Keep your marriage going.
I
Come on,
definitely
you got to keep it together for the kids. Just cheat."
yes, several men, several married men who are respected in their families and in their communities said that to me,
Hmm.
and I admired them for their capacity to do it. I just couldn't.
You admire them for
I
their
did
capacity to
honestly.
cheat. I love it.
Yes,
It's
you know
kind of
why?
hilarious.
You know why? Because they kept their family together, and they kept the ball moving in like the convention. It's hard being unconventional out here.
Yeah.
You know,
Kept
it's
their family together. That's like such an interesting thing. I think what you mean by that is keep your family together every day, right? Keeping the nuclear family
the
together.
nuclear family
But your
together.
family's still intact. It's still there, right?
Mhm.
Like y'all still have the bond. You still have the bond with your kids. So like it's still there.
Yeah,
It's just changed.
yeah.
And it's interesting because it's almost like there's an escalator for that also,
Mhm,
right? There's an
mhm,
escalator for relationships, but there's also an escalator for like grown up things that you have to do.
mhm.
And it's like once you've, established that nuclear family, the idea of moving somehow away from that seems so absurd.
Yeah, absurd and is looked down upon.
Yeah.
And also having a nuclear family is like a benchmark of success in our
Right.
society.
People are like,
And
"Oh my gosh, you've been married for 70 years, the
right.
dream," right?
Yeah, and I was walking away from the dream.
Right.
I was destroying not only my dream, but I was destroying my ex-wife's dream, and she didn't sign up for that. She didn't ask for that.
Was it your So how do you feel now? Like, do you feel like it wasn't actually your dream? Do you Yeah, like what yeah, how do you feel now? So is there any part of you where something along those lines is still a dream? And do you feel like, you know what I mean? Like, have you walked away from one dream to like an alternate universe? Like, how do you feel about it now?
Well, I'll say this. I think it's important to say that Um, I don't know if I'll ever get over crushing my ex-wife's vision for her life
Yeah.
with me
Yeah.
because I loved her so much and I still love her to this day, but I loved what she loved about our connection and what we both loved about our connection together and what we were doing in life together. Um, and to be the one to sever that based on what emerged within me and what I learned, came to learn about myself over time, um, that'll always hurt me. That'll always hurt me. That'll always be like a sore point. Um, as I've come into loving myself and understanding myself and accepting myself, to answer your question, absolutely, I have a new vision and a new dream of what's possible and what all these things can look like. And that process is consistent in a lot of areas of my life in terms of ways that I reject convention. But at that stage in my life, that was one of the major things that in liberating myself in that way had so many consequences for others, including my children, based on, again, what's considered the norm in society. That'll always, be a part of that double-edged sword.
And, I guess I think we talked about this. We have talked about this before. What kind of options did your ex-wife, did your ex-wife look into doing this with you? Did she look into like, I'll be non-monogamous with you?
She read a book that I asked her to read, um, and it was like absolutely not. Like
Mhm.
when she learned like some of the ins and outs of how people live this way, it wasn't appealing to her in any way.
Right.
So yeah.
I often wonder if that's a result of conditioning or if some people are naturally like that. I often wonder that. I guess that's like an answer we'll never really know.
Yeah, I think it's some of both.
Yeah.
I think it's some of both, but yeah.
What else do you any like, reflections, anything else about your story you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think one of the things I'll say is that one of the reasons why I'm outspoken and ever since my separation, I went on to social media, my Facebook page, and I started posting videos talking about what happened. Um, and the hashtag I use is growing through it. Um, where I would just record videos because I felt like if I had known that consensual non-monogamy was an option, if I had known that polyamorous people existed when I was a young man, I wouldn't have gotten married under the
Right.
context of monogamy and been in a position to hurt someone the way that me learning what I learned about myself did.
Mhm.
Um,
So you wanted to bring more awareness so
yeah,
that if somebody else was feeling something like the way you're feeling, they would know, hey, there's another option and
yeah,
you don't have
yeah.
I
You
understand that.
don't have to go down that road. Also, for a lot of people who out here are cheating, it's like, you know, I know that it's not a remedy for all people who cheat, that they can go to consensual non-monogamy and find freedom and liberty in the ways they need. But I think less people would. I feel like if they knew that it was an option, if it was more socially acceptable, and by me speaking and people like us talking about it, I'm hoping that it will continue to make it more socially acceptable for people to be consensually non-monogamous, so that non-monogamous people are not getting in relationships with monogamous people. And I really feel like the way that I was questioning things, even in my teens and in my early 20s, if I had known that this was a thing, I would have dated in this arena people who also felt like this, who were questioning things like me, and they would have avoided so much heartache and pain for myself and others.
Yeah. Very relatable. Very much understand that.
Yeah. So that's it. That's my story. That's how I got here. Thank y'all for listening. And as always, shoot us your questions, your comments, and we'll talk next time.
Yeah. See y'all. See y'all next time.
Peace.
Thank you
For listening to Sunshine and Rainbows. If you enjoyed the show, please show your support by liking, commenting, and sharing this episode.
Please also subscribe to our media platform, Sustainable Solutions Media, and follow us on Instagram at Sustainable Solutions Media.